Welcome to another thrilling Fated Mates Werewolf romance audiobook. If you are new to our channel, we invite you to subscribe and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our daily releases of captivating werewolf romance stories. And if you enjoy our content, don't forget to leave a like to show your support. For our loyal listeners, welcome back. Excited to have you here again. Shall we begin? Act 1. Moonlit Beginnings. The air felt different tonight. The kind of different that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Maybe it was the full moon, high and brilliant in the cloudless sky. Or maybe it was the way the wind seemed to whisper through the trees, like it was carrying something, an omen, a warning. I couldn't tell, but I had learned over the years to trust my instincts, and they were telling me something was off. I pushed through the dense underbrush, my boots quiet against the damp earth. The woods surrounding Silverclaw Pack's territory were my second skin, each tree, each path, familiar. It was my job to keep it that way. As an enforcer, it was my duty to ensure no one trespassed, no one threatened the pack. We had strict rules, orders, but tonight the woods felt charged, like the air right before a storm. My senses flared. A twig snapped just ahead of me. Then the faintest rustle of leaves behind me. I slowed my pace, every muscle in my body tightening. My wolf side stirred, instinctively alert. I let the wind wash over me, testing the air, feeling it with more than just my skin. There was something or someone near. I glanced around, scanning the shadows. Nothing visible, but I could feel it. The presence was subtle, elusive. A human maybe, or something else. My breath slowed as I focused. A soft breeze whispered past me, carrying a faint scent, a scent I couldn't place. Not human, not wolf, but something familiar. I couldn't explain it, but it tugged at me. A pull deep inside, as though the earth itself was trying to tell me something. I clenched my jaw and moved forward, the tension in my body growing with each step. Tradition was everything to us. Order. The rules of the pack ran deep, were carved into our bones. But I had to admit there was something inside me, something darker, that had always felt the weight of these rules. Something that stirred at the edges of my control, especially when it came to the unexpected, the unknown. The moonlight cut through the trees, casting silver beams across the forest floor. I stopped, waiting, listening. The silence around me felt heavy, full of unspoken things. Then I heard it. A sound, a breath almost, just to my left. I pivoted instinctively, my hand reaching for the silver knife strapped to my belt. And there, standing just beyond the shadows, was a woman. She was as out of place as a drop of rain in a desert, yet her presence seemed as natural as the forest itself. Her dark hair was tangled around her shoulders, her eyes wide with fear, but there was something else there. Something that called to me. I didn't know it yet, but she was the reason the air felt different tonight. My wolf howled inside me, wild, desperate. But I pushed it back. "Who are you?" I kept my voice low, steady, even though my instincts screamed to move, to get closer, to protect. She didn't answer right away. Her gaze locked with mine, and for a moment I saw everything in those eyes: pain, determination, and something else. Something I couldn't name. I took a step forward. "You're trespassing." Her lips parted, but no words came out. She looked lost, like she didn't belong anywhere. The silence between us stretched, the moonlight above us shifting as the trees whispered around us. The pull I felt, it wasn't normal. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was a Silverclaw enforcer. I wasn't supposed to care about some lost human, but there it was. That pull. And I couldn't ignore it. The wolf in me stirred again. My heart beat a little faster. This wasn't just any stranger. She was something else entirely. I didn't know it then, but I would soon learn that she wasn't just a trespasser. She was my fate. I could hear the soft rustle of the underbrush, a whisper of movement just beyond my reach. Someone, or something, was out there. The scent of pine, wet earth, and the cold night air filled my senses as I shifted deeper into the shadows of the trees. My breath came steady, despite the adrenaline pumping through my veins, every muscle coiled tight. I didn't know where I was going anymore. All I knew was that I couldn't stop. I couldn't afford to stop. The path ahead was narrow, barely more than a trace in the thick forest. My boots kicked up the occasional leaf, but I kept my pace quick, fluid. My eyes darted from shadow to shadow, scanning for movement, listening for sounds beyond the usual chirping of night creatures. Every step I took was careful, measured. Too much noise, too much movement, and I'd be caught. I couldn't let that happen. Not again. I'd been running for days now, my body sore, my mind fractured. There was always the nagging feeling of being watched, of being hunted, and it pushed me harder, faster. My past had a way of following me, relentless, unforgiving. It was a ghost I couldn't shake, but it wasn't just my past that kept me moving through the woods now. There was something else, something off. A presence. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, and I froze mid-step, listening. There it was again. The subtle scrape of a branch, the faintest breath of wind. Someone was close. I kept moving, faster this time, slipping into a crouch as I weaved through the trees. My heart beat louder in my chest, but I kept my breathing steady. The last thing I wanted was to draw attention. If they were still behind me, if they were close, I needed to find a way to lose them. I pushed forward, using every ounce of skill I'd learned over the years to blend into the night. I was resourceful, quick, and efficient, qualities that had kept me alive so far. But even I knew that eventually I'd run out of places to hide. I heard footsteps then. Not the soft, patient steps of a predator, but the heavy, confident tread of someone sure of where they were going. A man, by the sound of it. His movements weren't careful, he wasn't trying to be quiet. He was hunting. I cursed under my breath. No time to think, no time to plan. I'd had a run-in with these men before. They weren't just after me. They had connections, dangerous ones. And now they were closing in. If I wasn't careful, it would be over. I darted off the path and into a thicket of bramble, my skin scratching against the jagged branches as I moved. The pain didn't register. Only the need to stay ahead did. I kept my eyes focused on the shadows, listening for every sound. The footsteps behind me grew louder. My heart raced. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was something deeper, something primal. A sense of impending doom that came with knowing how easily I could be caught. How easy it would be for them to find me, take me, and drag me back into the mess I had barely escaped. And then I heard it, an unmistakable sound. A crack of a twig beneath a boot, only it wasn't just any boot. The step was too heavy, too deliberate. It wasn't one of them. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Someone else was out here. Someone was watching me. The woods fell deathly still. I waited, watching the shadows around me, trying to stay hidden. The tension in the air was suffocating, but I kept my body still, barely breathing. I wasn't sure who or what was out there, but I wasn't about to give myself away. Then I saw him. Through the brush. A figure, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. His eyes glinted in the moonlight, intense and sharp, and I felt it. A shift in the air, a stirring of something I couldn't explain. I tried to push back the unease, but it was like a tug in my chest. He wasn't like the others. There was something different about him, something that didn't belong in this night. My mind raced, adrenaline spiking. Should I run? Should I fight? My body trembled slightly as my eyes locked on him, unable to look away. I needed to decide. Fast. But then he stopped. His eyes flicked toward where I was hidden, and for one frozen moment I was sure he saw me. But then he turned away, as though something had shifted in his focus. He moved deeper into the forest, his figure disappearing into the trees. I stayed frozen, holding my breath. The shadows around me felt thick, oppressive. He hadn't caught sight of me, not yet. But there was something magnetic in the way he moved, something primal that made my heart race even harder. As the minutes stretched, I finally allowed myself to breathe. But I didn't move. Not yet. Whoever or whatever he was, I knew the danger wasn't over. Not yet. Not until I was sure that the threat of my past and whatever lurked in these woods was gone. And then I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. A whisper in the air that made the hairs on my arms stand up. The pull of something unfamiliar, something ancient, stirring deep inside me. The night suddenly felt colder, as though the world had shifted in the space between one breath and the next. I wasn't alone, not by a long shot. I stepped into the clearing and stopped dead. The night seemed to hold its breath, and for a moment I thought I'd imagined the whole thing, the pull, the sharp instinct that had dragged me from the trail and into this moonlit space. The trees surrounded the clearing like silent witnesses, their branches high and tangled, but the air was thick with something else. Something different. The full moon hung low in the sky, casting silver beams across the ground, and it made everything around me feel unreal. The totems, old and worn, stood like silent sentinels at the edges of the clearing. Their markings whispered of ancient times, of things long forgotten, but tonight they felt alive, charged. I took a step forward, the soft rustle of the forest underfoot barely a sound. Then I saw her. She was crouched low, her body tense as she eyed me with those dark, wary eyes. The moment our gazes locked, something deep in my chest jolted. The force of it hit me like a physical blow, a surge of energy I couldn't explain. I should have known better, should have reacted faster, but my body just froze, caught in that strange moment. She didn't move either, but the air between us crackled. Suspicion, instinct, fear, they were all there, hanging in the space between us. Her eyes darted around the clearing, looking for an escape, and I couldn't help but wonder why she was here, alone, in the middle of my territory. "What are you doing here?" I kept my voice steady, though the urge to move, to close the distance, clawed at me from the inside. She didn't answer right away. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The silence stretched long, thick, and uncomfortable. Then she spoke, her voice low, like she was testing the air before committing. "I'm just passing through," she said, but her words didn't match the tension in her posture or the way she was still watching me like a rabbit might eye a predator. I didn't buy it. The air around her was too charged, her presence too unsettling. "You're lying," I said, taking a step closer. Her eyes flashed, but she didn't back down. "I'm not here to cause trouble. Just leave me alone." I could feel the raw energy between us, something primal and ancient, swirling in the air. The pull was undeniable now. It was like a magnet, tugging at the core of me. My wolf was awake, pacing restlessly inside me, trying to get closer, trying to claim. I gritted my teeth and fought it back. As I took another step toward her, something shifted in the air. A pulse of power, sharp and electric, ran through the clearing. My vision blurred for a moment, the world around me twisting, stretching. The totems, those ancient carvings, seemed to glow faintly, as if they recognized something. Something important. I blinked, trying to shake the dizziness, but it only deepened. Images flashed in my mind, snippets, fragments like memories that weren't mine. I saw her, this woman, standing at my side. A future that didn't make sense but felt right. I saw us bound together, but the vision was fleeting, disorienting. Then it stopped, as quickly as it had started. I staggered, almost losing my footing. I had to brace myself on the nearest tree to steady my legs. What the hell was that? She must have seen my reaction, the confusion and the momentary loss of control, because her gaze softened just a fraction. But her expression quickly hardened again, and she took a step back. "What's wrong with you?" Her voice was sharp, her words tinged with fear now, though I could see the hesitation in her. I couldn't answer. I didn't have the words to explain it. The vision. The pull. I had never felt anything like it. I could still feel it, like an invisible thread tying me to her, like something was calling to me through her. "You," I whispered, the word slipping out before I could stop it. My breath caught in my chest as I realized the truth. My heart thundered in my chest, but it wasn't fear that gripped me. It was something deeper. "You're my mate." The words hung in the air between us, thick with meaning. I could see the flicker of recognition in her eyes, though she tried to cover it with a quick glance away. She didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to believe me. I stood there, my pulse racing, my chest tight with emotions I couldn't untangle. There was fear in her eyes, yes, but there was also something else. Something that made her hesitate. The truth of it settled over me like a weight. It wasn't just the pull. It wasn't just instinct. It was fate. She was mine. And the realization hit me harder than any fight, any battle I'd ever fought. But she wasn't ready for it. And that hurt. "I don't want any part of this," she muttered, turning to leave. My wolf growled deep inside me, demanding I go after her, claim her, pull her back to me. But I fought it down. I couldn't force this on her, not yet. But the tug of our connection wouldn't fade. Not ever. And I knew deep in my gut that nothing would ever be the same. She was my fate. And nothing, not even her denial, could change that. "Wait," I called after her, but she didn't turn back. I knew I couldn't stop her. Not yet. But I wouldn't let her slip away. Not when fate had already decided for us both. I just had to figure out how to make her believe it. I hadn't expected it to hit this hard. The revelation of our connection, of her being my fated mate, was like a blow to the chest. I'd expected confusion, anger, maybe even disbelief, but I hadn't prepared for the quiet weight of it. The air in the safe house felt thick, charged with something I didn't know how to handle. Not yet. Yet. Mara sat across from me, her arms crossed, eyes locked on the ground. She was still trying to make sense of it all. I could see it in the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw worked, grinding back and forth, like she was chewing on something bitter. I couldn't blame her. I was still wrestling with it myself. "So what now?" she asked, her voice low, but sharp. She didn't meet my eyes, but I could feel the weight of her gaze, as if she was trying to decide whether to trust me or throw me out. I took a breath, running my hand through my hair. The safe house was quiet, the only sound the soft crackling of the fire in the corner. Outside, the woods stretched into the darkness, their secrets kept well hidden. No one would find us here, not unless they knew exactly where to look. I leaned back in the chair, trying to find the right words. "This isn't something we can walk away from," I said, my voice steady but firm. "It's not just some coincidence. The pack's prophecy, it's real. You and I, we were meant to be." She snorted, a sharp, bitter sound that cut through the quiet. "Meant to be. That sounds like something out of a bad romance novel, not something I'm supposed to just accept." I couldn't argue with that. It did sound crazy, but it wasn't. I knew it deep down in a way that went beyond logic or reason. It was just the way things were. "Look," I said, trying to keep my tone calm, my words as steady as I could make them. "I didn't ask for this either. I didn't ask for you to walk into my life and shake everything up. But the pack's ancient traditions, the bond between us, it's too much," she interrupted, her voice soft, but there was fire in her eyes. "It's too much. I'm not part of this world. I don't even know how to fit into it." I took a breath, my hands resting on the arms of the chair, keeping myself grounded. "I get that. I do. You're human. You didn't sign up for this life. But you're here now, and you can't just walk away from what's already been set in motion." She rubbed her forehead like she was trying to fight off a headache. "I don't want to be here, Lucien. I'm not like you. I don't have your strength, your power. All I've got is what's left of a past that's chasing me down, and now I've got this to deal with too." Her words hit harder than I expected, and for a moment I didn't know what to say. She was right. She wasn't like me. She wasn't born into this life, this world where every choice carried weight, where tradition and destiny were carved into the very bones of the pack. She had her own demons to fight, but I wasn't ready to give up on her, not on us. "Mara," I said, leaning forward, my voice quieter now, "I know you didn't ask for this. I know you didn't choose it. But you're here, and no matter how much you want to run from it, we are connected. This bond, it's not something we can ignore." "You feel it too, don't you?" She flinched, like the question itself burned her, and for a moment I thought she might tell me to leave her alone. But then, slowly, she met my gaze. "I feel it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's overwhelming. But it's not what I wanted." I could hear the conflict in her voice, see the way it twisted inside her. I felt it too. The pull was there, undeniable. But so was the fear. "This isn't just about what you want," I said gently. "It's about what's necessary. The pack needs you. I need you." She looked away, her eyes searching the shadows of the room like they could offer her an escape. "And what do you need from me exactly? Because all I've got is someone else's mess, and I don't even know what part one play in any of this." There was a rawness to her voice, a desperation I hadn't expected. She didn't just resent the bond, she feared it. Feared what it meant for her life. I leaned forward, crossing the space between us. "You don't have to play any part you don't want to. But you're already in it, Mara. And whether you like it or not, I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together now." She stared at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. I could see the hesitation, the doubt, but underneath it there was something else. Something small but growing. Hope, maybe. Reluctant hope. "I don't know how to be a part of this world," she said finally, her voice quieter, more vulnerable than I'd ever heard it. "I don't know how to be with you, Lucian." The weight of her words settled between us like a heavy stone, and I let it sit there for a moment before I spoke again. "You don't have to know everything right now," I said softly. "I'll show you. I'll help you understand. We'll figure it out together." She looked down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to disappear. I reached out then, gently touching her hand, trying to offer something, anything that might ease the tension coiling between us. "You don't have to disappear, Mara. You've been running long enough. You don't have to run anymore." She met my gaze again, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I saw it the smallest flicker of something, a crack in her walls. But then it was gone, replaced by that same guarded look. "I don't know if I can do this," she said softly. I didn't have an answer for her. I didn't know if either of us could. But I knew one thing. I wouldn't let her go. Not when fate had already made its choice for both of us. "Then we'll take it one step at a time," I said, my voice steady. "Together." The room felt different now. What had once been a place of retreat was quickly transforming into something else. The walls, rough-hewn stone, now seemed to hold the weight of more than just the usual silence. I spread out the maps on the worn wooden table, the ancient scrolls stacked beside them. A mix of old and new, just like everything else about this situation. Mara's presence added something else, too, something uneasy and fresh. Something I wasn't sure how to deal with yet. I moved aside the papers, trying to focus, but the reality of it hit harder than I expected. I wasn't just planning a simple takedown of a criminal network. I was planning it with her. Mara stood beside the table, studying the map with a concentration that made me pause. The woman didn't need training in this world. She already had the instincts for survival, the quick thinking, the sharp edge needed to make it. A survivor. "I'm telling you," she said, pointing to a spot on the map. "There's no way they're still operating out of the old warehouse. They've moved, but I can't pin down the exact location yet." Her fingers brushed the edges of the map, tracing the route she knew by heart. It wasn't like her to let others take the lead, but I could see the way she used her instincts, not the blueprint on the paper. It was refreshing. She wasn't some helpless civilian who had no idea what was going on. No, she was more than capable of holding her own. I nodded. "I'll trust your instincts. You know this world better than I do. But we can't waste time. If they're still connected to the underworld, they're dangerous. Too dangerous." Mara gave a small, tight smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She might not have trusted me yet, but she was listening, following along. That was progress. She moved to a set of old scrolls, careful as she flipped through them. "There's a name here that keeps popping up," she said. "Roland Vasseur. I've seen him before. A real shadowy figure runs in the black market circles. The kind of guy who handles the dirty jobs. Her lips curled as she glanced at me. I don't think you're going to find any record of him in your PAX archives. I leaned in, studying the name. Vassar. It rang a bell, but I couldn't place it. My world had always been more about the pack, the territory, the laws of our kind. But Mara? She knew the human underworld better than I could ever hope to. Vassar's the key, I said quietly. We get him, we get answers. She shot me a look, a mix of skepticism and resignation. And how are we supposed to do that? He's not exactly the kind of guy who sits around waiting for someone to knock on his door. I smiled, though there was no humor in it. Leave that to me. She raised an eyebrow, a challenge in her gaze. You'll have to be faster than you look. This guy's smart, and he doesn't like to be found. Neither do I muttered. But the truth was, this was new territory for me. Not the fight, it was the balance, the strange merging of her world and mine. She had her own skills, her own connections, and damn if I wasn't starting to see how they could complement mine. There was a long silence between us, both of us focused on the task at hand. But the weight of the situation was starting to settle over me. The pack's traditions, their unbending laws, had always felt like chains around me. And now it was starting to feel like they were pulling me in a direction I wasn't ready for. Not with her. I had to fight back the instinct to claim her, to make the connection real. But I couldn't force it. Not yet. So what happens when we find him? She asked, snapping me out of my thoughts. I took a breath, pushing the weight of my own conflict aside. We take him. Find out who's pulling the strings, and we shut it down. End the threat. She gave a slight nod, but there was still doubt in her eyes. I couldn't blame her for it. She was still trying to figure this all out. So was I. We spent the next hour going over the plan, what we knew, what we didn't, and where the holes were. Mara was sharp. Her mind worked quickly, and before long we had a basic outline of what needed to be done. It felt like a strange kind of partnership, her street-smart instincts blending with my supernatural insight. There were moments where I caught myself impressed. Not many humans could hold their own, not against someone like Vassar. But Mara wasn't like most humans. I didn't know how this would end, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had someone in my corner. We finished laying out the plan, but something in the air didn't feel right. There was a shift, an energy that wasn't quite natural. I caught the movement first, something outside the window, a shadow, fleeting and fast. My instincts kicked in, and I stood up, moving toward the window. Mara followed, her hand going to the small knife she'd taken to wearing. I didn't have to say anything. She saw it too. I pushed the curtain aside, but whoever had been there was already gone. I stared out into the darkness, listening, but there was only silence now. Was that him? Mara asked quietly. No, I said, my voice tight. But someone's watching us. I turned back to the table, my mind racing. Whoever was out there, this wasn't over. The danger was only just beginning, and now we had to move fast. But I could already feel it, the weight of what we were about to face, settling heavily in the pit of my stomach. The plan we'd just laid out? It was already changing, and it wasn't just the criminals we had to worry about anymore. The city was alive in a way that felt raw, dangerous, and unforgiving. The neon lights from the signs flickered in the distance, casting shadows that seemed to stretch across the cracked sidewalks. It was a world I knew but hadn't had to deal with in a long time. A world where danger wasn't hidden, it was on display, waiting for the next victim. We moved through the shadows, blending in with the crowd, our footsteps quiet on the rain-slicked streets. The warehouse was ahead, tucked in between two run-down buildings, far from the eyes of those who thought the city was safe. It was the perfect place to conduct business, as far from the reach of the law as possible. The perfect place for the kinds of deals Mara had warned me about. I glanced at her, her face illuminated by the flashing streetlight as we neared the entrance. She was focused, her movements smooth and purposeful. Mara had learned this life the hard way, and now she was teaching me how to navigate it. "You sure this is the place?" I asked, my voice low. We'd been tracking this particular deal for weeks, and this was the moment everything needed to fall into place. "Yeah," she said, nodding. "This is where they meet." She glanced over her shoulder, but her eyes were sharp, not hesitant. She knew what was at stake, and she wasn't afraid of the risks. My senses were stretched thin, the sounds of the city rushing at me from every direction, but I could feel the difference here. The air was thick with something else: tension, danger. I could almost smell the deal being made. "You lead," I said, stepping back to let her take the lead. My wolf side was on edge, alert to everything, but Mara was the one who knew how to move in this world, how to stay unnoticed when necessary. We approached the side entrance, a rusted metal door that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Mara crouched down, fingers working quickly on the lock. In seconds, the door creaked open. We slipped inside, and the musty, stale air hit me like a wall. The warehouse was dim, lit only by a few scattered bulbs overhead, their light casting jagged shadows across the floor. I let my senses stretch out, tuning into the sounds around me: footsteps, hushed voices, the subtle scrape of metal on concrete. I could smell the stench of sweat, the bitterness of fear. I could feel the weight of the dangerous men in this room, but it didn't matter. They didn't know we were here yet. Mara moved ahead, her steps light, almost silent. She knew how to slip through the cracks, disappearing into the shadows, and I followed, letting her guide me through the maze of crates and metal structures. We reached the center of the warehouse, where a few men were gathered. I could see them now, the criminals we'd been tracking for weeks. They were speaking in low voices, passing something between them. I could see the gleam of steel and the glitter of jewels, the kinds of things Mara had warned me about: the stolen goods, the illegal trades, the dirt that ran deep. I stayed back, hidden in the shadows, but my body was coiled tight, ready. Mara crouched beside a stack of crates, her eyes scanning the scene. Then she gave me a barely perceptible nod. It was time. I moved first, my werewolf speed taking over. I was on the closest man in seconds, my hand clamping over his mouth before he could scream. My other hand twisted his wrist behind him, the bones snapping under the pressure. He crumpled to the ground, unconscious before he could make a sound. The second man turned, but by the time he saw me, it was too late. A swift punch to the face sent him crashing into a pile of crates. I heard the metal snap, a harsh screech of wood splintering, but there was no time to worry about the noise. Mara was already on the third. She moved like a shadow, quick and precise, taking the man down with a well-placed strike to his temple. He slumped to the floor, and she was on the next one, using her agility to slide behind him and choke him out before he could even process what was happening. I didn't need to look at her to know she was good at this. We were a team, a deadly combination of strength and skill, and we moved together like we'd done it 1,000 times. There were only two left now. One of them had his hand on his gun, but he wasn't fast enough. My hand was on his wrist before he could pull the trigger, twisting it hard. The gun fell from his hand, and I knocked him out with a sharp punch to his gut. Mara had the last man down in seconds. She was a blur, moving so fast I almost didn't see her. The man never stood a chance. We stood there for a moment, catching our breath, the only sound the quiet hum of the overhead lights and the pounding of my heartbeat. The air was thick with adrenaline, but there was no time to savor the moment. We had work to do. Mara moved to the table in the middle of the room, where a laptop sat, open and buzzing with data. She quickly unplugged it, her fingers working fast. "Got it," she said, her voice low but steady. "All the information we need." I nodded, my senses still on alert. We had to move quickly. The rest of the crew wouldn't be far behind, and we'd need to be long gone before they figured out what happened. Mara turned to me, a small, almost satisfied grin on her face. We make a good team. I could feel the pull between us again, strong and undeniable. She wasn't wrong. Our strengths, her speed, my strength worked together better than I expected, but this wasn't just about the mission. It wasn't just about the takedown. I couldn't ignore the fact that something else was growing between us. I had to focus, though. There would be time for everything else later. "Let's go," I said, my voice rough with the tension in the air. "We've got what we came for." We moved through the shadows again, slipping out of the warehouse and back into the night. As we disappeared into the city, the thrill of the job faded, but the connection between us didn't. I couldn't ignore it. But tonight we dismantled one piece of the puzzle, and that was a win. The council chamber was as imposing as always, stone walls covered in ancient tapestries, the heavy scent of burning torches in the air, and the low murmur of voices filling the space. The flickering flames cast long shadows over the high-backed chairs where the elders of the pack sat, their eyes sharp and calculating as they watched Mara and me. The tension in the room was thick, like a storm waiting to break. I stood at the front, my arms crossed over my chest, trying to keep my posture steady, but inside, I was anything but calm. I could feel the weight of their gazes, the judgment, the skepticism. The pack's traditions were sacred, unchanging, but today it wasn't just about tradition. It was about survival. And survival, as I'd come to realize, meant embracing change. Mara stood next to me, her expression cool but alert, eyes flicking from one elder to the next. She wasn't part of this world, but she had proven herself on the streets, in the warehouse, and now in this chamber. Her courage was clear, and though the elders didn't want to admit it, they saw it too. The eldest of the council, a man named Arik, leaned forward in his seat, his sharp eyes never leaving Mara. "You bring this human into our midst, Lucian. You expect us to accept her insights." His voice was low, but it carried the weight of 100 years of tradition. I didn't flinch. "She's not just some outsider. She's proven herself. The information she brought back from that raid, it's the key to taking down the criminals who threaten us." Mara stepped forward, her chin raised slightly, a hint of defiance in her eyes, but she didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her actions during the raid spoke louder than any words could. Arik narrowed his eyes but didn't speak immediately. The rest of the elders murmured among themselves, weighing the situation. I could feel their hesitation, the uncertainty swirling in the air. This wasn't easy for them to accept, not after decades of living by the same rules, the same boundaries. A human working alongside them was a challenge to everything they'd ever known. Mara's insights were invaluable, I continued, my voice steady, even though I could feel the pull of my wolf side, wanting to make them see reason, to make them understand. "We can't afford to ignore what she's brought to the table." Mara remained quiet, her gaze unwavering. Her cool exterior hid a hint of nerves, but she wasn't showing it. The tension between us was there, but it wasn't just about her place in the pack anymore. It was about what we were building together. Another elder, a woman named Elira, finally spoke. "You speak of insights, but we have never needed humans to tell us how to handle our enemies." She glanced at Mara, her gaze dismissive, but there was no malice in it, just suspicion. What makes her different? I could feel Mara stiffen beside me, but she didn't react. She didn't need to. I could feel the shift in her, the steady resolve that had been growing stronger with every challenge. This wasn't about proving herself to the packet. It was about proving to me that she was more than capable of handling whatever came our way. "She's different, because she has the knowledge we lack," I said, turning to look at Mara, my voice softer now. "For her ears alone. She knows how to move in the human world. We've been too focused on our territory, on protecting what we have, without realizing that the threat comes from outside, from beyond our borders." The room fell silent, the weight of my words settling in. Arik's expression softened just a fraction, and I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected that someone like Mara could bring something to the table that we needed. "We'll give her a chance," Arik finally said, his voice resigned but not dismissive. "But know this, Lucian, she has no place in the leadership of this pack. You and I both know how the pack operates." I nodded, understanding the unspoken terms. She wasn't one of us. She never could be. But she was still vital, still an ally. And that was something I hadn't realized I needed until now. The council began to disperse, murmuring among themselves. Mara's shoulders relaxed slightly as the pressure in the room eased, but I could feel the quiet storm still brewing inside her. She didn't belong here. She wasn't a part of this world. And yet we had no choice but to make this work. As the last of the elders filed out, I turned to Mara, meeting her gaze. "You did well," I said, keeping my voice low. She didn't smile, but her lips curled just slightly. "They don't like me. They don't like change." I took a step closer, my voice softer now. "But they'll come around. They have to." Her eyes met mine, something unreadable in them. "You don't have to convince me, Lucien. I'm not the one you need to sell this to." I swallowed the words I wanted to say. The truth was, I did need to convince her. We were treading in unfamiliar waters, both of us. She was still an outsider, still unsure of where she fit in, and I wasn't sure how to show her that she already belonged. Later that night, as the fire crackled in the hearth of the lodge, I stood alone in the corner, staring at the family heirloom hanging on the wall. It was an old pendant, passed down through generations of my family, a symbol of the Silver Claw Pack's strength and history. I reached out, my fingers grazing the cool metal, and for the first time in my life, I felt a real conflict deep inside me. The weight of my ancestors' legacy pressed against me, but so did the pull of something new, something that was growing between Mara and me. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't deny it. The future was here, standing beside me, and it didn't look anything like the past. But I wasn't ready to let go of the past either. Not completely. I couldn't. Not yet. The storm hit like a slap in the face. 1 minute the night had been still, the air thick with the satisfaction of a hard-won victory. We'd done it, taken down a piece of the criminal network that had been plaguing us. But the quiet wasn't meant to last. A distant rumble of thunder, a crack of lightning that split the sky, and suddenly the world outside felt as unsettled as the one inside. I stood in the corner of the safe house, watching the rain lash against the ancient stone walls. The sound of it pounding the roof was deafening, but it did little to drown out the restless energy in the air. Mara had retreated into a corner by the fire, her posture tense, like she was waiting for something to break. I could feel it, too, the unease, the gnawing sense that we weren't finished yet. I turned away from the window, watching her. She was trying to hide it, but I could see the flickers of discomfort on her face. Her mind was elsewhere, and I knew exactly where that elsewhere was. "Your past is coming for you," I said, my voice low, knowing it was more a statement than a question. She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes focused on the flickering flames. Her fingers twisted the hem of her shirt, a nervous habit I'd seen too many times. I could almost feel the weight of the ghost she carried, the memories, the betrayals, the things she never said. "I don't want to talk about it," she finally muttered, her voice tight, but I could hear the crack in it. I could feel the truth she was trying to bury. I walked over to her, standing just close enough that I could sense the tension in her body. "You don't have to. But it's going to catch up to you, Mara. It always does." Her eyes flicked up to mine, raw with something I hadn't seen before, fear, and maybe regret. "I don't have a choice," she whispered, more to herself than to me. I dropped my voice even lower, keeping it soft. "You're not alone in this." She didn't meet my eyes. Instead, she stood abruptly, moving to the window. The storm outside seemed to match the storm in her, restless, violent, and full of things she didn't want to face. "I thought I could outrun it," she said quietly. "But it's been following me my whole life. It's not just about criminals or dirty deals anymore. It's him." Her words hit me harder than I expected, and the sharp edge of tension cut through the air between us. Him, whoever he was, it was enough to make Mara go still, her body taut with fear. "He's the one who's been hunting you?" I asked, my tone barely a whisper. She nodded, her hand resting against the cold stone of the window as she stared out at the dark, storm-tossed night. "He doesn't forget. He never forgets. He's always waiting, always watching. and sooner or later he'll find me again. I could hear the bitterness in her voice, the weight of the memories she carried. She didn't have to say more. I could feel it, the darkness that followed her, the vengeful ghost from her past. A cold chill ran through me, not from the storm outside, but from the knowledge that her past was alive, moving and waiting. And that meant danger was closing in, whether we liked it or not. I crossed the room, my footsteps quiet on the worn wooden floor, and stood beside her. "Who is he?" She hesitated for a moment, but then she turned, meeting my gaze for the first time since the conversation started. Her eyes were full of things she didn't say. "His name is Roland Vasseur." I froze, the name hitting me like a punch to the gut. Roland Vasseur. The same name we'd seen pop up during the heist. The same man whose name had been whispered in the shadows of the human underworld. "He's not just a player in this game," Mara continued, her voice trembling slightly. "He's the one pulling the strings, and he's coming for me." The storm outside howled, the wind battering against the stone walls. But in that moment, everything in the room felt still. The air was thick with the weight of what she'd just told me. Vasseur wasn't just a threat. He was the threat. And now he was after Mara. I clenched my jaw, my wolf side stirring, eager to chase, to fight, to tear down everything that posed a danger to her. But I held it back. For now, the strategy mattered more than the fight. "We need a plan," I said, my voice calm, though I could feel the tension in my muscles. "And we need to move quickly." She nodded, but I could see the fear still in her eyes. She was trying to hide it, but it was there. The ghost of Vasseur's presence was already starting to close in, and it wouldn't be long before he came knocking. "I don't know how much longer I can outrun him," she admitted, her voice thick with frustration. "Every time I think I'm safe, he shows up again. We won't let him get to you," I said firmly, the words leaving my mouth before I even had time to think them through. The connection between us was undeniable, and I wasn't about to let anyone take her from me. We stood there for a moment, the weight of the storm and the danger outside pressing in on us. It was too quiet in the room now, the silence thick with unspoken fears. Then, without warning, I heard it, the faintest sound outside the window. A shift in the air, something I couldn't explain, but it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I tensed, every muscle in my body locking into place. "Did you hear that?" Mara looked at me, her face suddenly pale. "It's him, isn't it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Before I could answer, a shadow flickered outside the window. It was brief, but unmistakable. Someone was watching us. I stepped back from the window, my senses fully alert now. "Stay here," I ordered, but there was no hiding the urgency in my voice. Mara's eyes flashed with something fierce, something I hadn't expected. "I'm not hiding," she said, her chin lifting just a fraction. "Not again." She moved toward the door, ready to face whatever came next. I didn't argue. I couldn't. We weren't running anymore. Not from Vasseur, not from the past, not from anything. We were going to fight, and I'd be damned if anyone got in our way. The storm had returned with a vengeance. The rain slashed down through the trees, mixing with the distant growls of thunder, as if nature itself was angry at the world. We'd made our way deep into the forest, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. Every rustle of the leaves, every movement in the dark shadows, set my senses on high alert. Mara was a few steps ahead of me, her steps quick, purposeful. She was used to this, used to running, used to hiding. But tonight there was nowhere to hide. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I could feel the pull of something darker, something deadly closing in around us. It wasn't just the storm, it was them. I didn't need to look behind me to know they were there. I could smell them now. The scent of wet earth mixed with the distinct musk of human sweat and gunpowder. "Vasseur's men!" I grabbed Mara's arm, pulling her back into the shadows. "Stay quiet," I whispered, though I knew she didn't need the warning. She'd been in situations like this before, and I had to trust her to keep it together. We moved deeper into the forest, weaving through the trees. The wind howled, and the rain made the ground slick beneath our feet. But we were silent, our movements practiced, a rhythm we'd perfected over the past few days. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting. The ambush hit us like a freight train. I barely had time to react before I heard the crack of branches and the sharp whistle of a rope snapping through the air. I spun, but not fast enough. A net heavy, thick suddenly entangled me, pulling me off balance. My instincts kicked in, but the dampness of the storm and the tightness of the net made it harder to break free. I heard Mara's gasp, and then the crack of a branch breaking underfoot. She was close, but there were too many of them, too many voices. The smell of metal, of firearms, mixed with the sharp scent of humans who thought they had us cornered. "Get her!" a voice shouted through the downpour, and I saw Mara dart out of the corner of my eye. She was trying to run, trying to get away, but they were too quick. I fought against the net, but the ropes tightened around me, dragging me down. I could hear her footsteps ahead, frantic, panicked. "Mara!" I roared, my voice a raw mix of frustration and desperation, but the sound of the forest swallowed the words, drowned them out. My pack was supposed to be with us. They were supposed to back us up, to protect us. But the hesitation in their movements told me everything I needed to know. There was distrust here, the kind of distrust that could tear everything apart. As I twisted, trying to free myself, I saw one of my own pack members hesitate, a hand raised but unsure. That moment of doubt was enough. I could feel the shift in the air, the dangerous crackle of betrayal. "Take her!" I heard another voice shout, and before I could push myself free, I saw Mara stumble, her face twisted in fear as she was grabbed from behind. "No!" I roared, the wolf inside me snarling, furious at the sight of her being overpowered, of the men dragging her away, but the net wouldn't loosen. I tore at it, my claws raking against the ropes, but it was useless. "Mara!" I screamed again, the words breaking as I felt her panic echoing through the bond between us. She fought back, kicking and struggling, but the numbers were too many. They overpowered her with ease, dragging her further into the darkness. I could feel her resistance, but it was slipping. Her struggles grew weaker as they pulled her away. I finally broke free from the net, ripping it apart with a savage growl. I ran toward the sound of her screams, but I was too late. By the time I reached her, she was gone. The world seemed to spin around me, the sound of the rain mixing with the thudding of my heart. I dropped to my knees, hands clenched into fists. The betrayal from my own pack stung more than the rain ever could. My loyalty, my duty, had been questioned, and Mara had paid the price for it. I scanned the area, my senses on overdrive, but there was no sign of her. Just the wet earth, the crashing storm, and the distant echo of footsteps retreating into the night. And then I saw it. The small token she always carried with her, the silver pendant, the one that had been hers since I met her. It was lying in the mud, half buried, a symbol of everything I had failed to protect. My chest tightened. I picked it up, feeling the weight of her absence, of the loss that cut deeper than any wound. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. I had failed her. The storm raged on, but there was no comfort in the rain, no relief in the thunder. The enemy was closer now, and Mara, my fated mate, was in their hands, and I had no idea how to get her back. Act 2. The Depths of Betrayal. The council chamber felt colder than usual. The stone walls, thick and old, had witnessed countless decisions made by the pack over the centuries, but this felt different. The air was thick with tension, a heavy silence hanging over the room like an impending storm. The flickering torchlight cast shadows that seemed to stretch longer, as if they, too, were waiting for something to break. I stood at the center, facing the elders of the pack, their eyes burning with suspicion and doubt. Behind me, Mara's absence was palpable. She'd been taken, and I was supposed to be the one to protect her. But now, instead of rallying around the bond we shared, the pack was looking at me as if I'd invited a threat into our home. Lucian Arik, the eldest of the council, began, his voice low but sharp. We gave you a chance. We trusted your judgment when you brought her into our fold, but now we're faced with the reality of her loyalties. I clenched my fists at my sides, trying to hold on to my control. The last thing I wanted was to snap, to lash out, but I couldn't deny the anger that was bubbling inside me. Loyalties? How could they question that? How could they even consider the idea that Mara wasn't on our side? She had risked everything to help us, to help me. Don't stand there and tell me you don't see it, Arik continued, his eyes never leaving me. She's human. She doesn't belong here, and now look where we are having to deal with enemies that we should have never faced. A ripple of murmurs ran through the room. The distrust was palpable, and I could feel it, pressing in on me like the weight of the pack's history. The pack had always held firm to tradition, to loyalty to the clan, to the rules that had been handed down from generation to generation. But now those rules seemed suffocating us. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. Mara has done nothing but help us, I said, my voice steady, though inside I was a storm. She risked her life to give us the intel we needed. She's not our enemy. And yet, Arik's voice cut through my thoughts. We don't know where her true loyalties lie, do we? I could hear the challenge in his words. The others were listening, watching my every move. I wasn't just defending Mara now. I was defending everything that had changed in me, the part of me that had chosen to follow something beyond the pack's law, beyond the traditions. You're asking me to turn my back on her, I said, the weight of the words settling on my chest like a boulder. You're asking me to betray her just because she's not like us. There was a shift in the room, a subtle but dangerous shift. I could see it in their eyes, the doubt, the suspicion. The pack was fractured, torn between tradition and the uncertainty that Mara represented. Some of them feared her. Some of them feared what she meant for our way of life. I turned to face the others, the younger pack members who had been quiet until now, who watched this all unfold with nervous eyes. We're not the same pack we used to be, I said, my voice quieter now, almost desperate. I'm not the same person I was before Mara, and neither are you. The words hung in the air. There were no immediate responses, just the steady drip of water from the storm outside, the quiet tension that only made it worse. But the seed of doubt was planted, and I could feel the ripples spreading. You are Silverclaw, Lucian, Arik said, his tone final, and you will choose the pack over any human, any outsider. I could feel the weight of his words, the gravity of the decision that had been thrust onto me. I was caught between two worlds, two forces pulling me in opposite directions. On one side, my duty to the pack, to the traditions that had shaped us for generations. On the other, Mara, the woman who had become a part of me in ways I couldn't explain, the woman I had sworn to protect. But I couldn't make that choice, not with the pack this divided, not with the pressure weighing down on me from all sides. I stood there in silence, the council watching me, waiting for me to break. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. We'll continue this discussion later, Arik said, his voice like ice, as the others stood and began to leave, casting me dark looks as they filed out one by one. I stayed in the room, alone now, the weight of the decision still hanging over me like a cloud. I wasn't ready to make a choice. Not yet. The door closed behind them, and I stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty chamber. I could still feel their eyes on me, the pressure to conform to the pack's way of thinking. But I couldn't do it. Not anymore. I left the council chamber and made my way back to my quarters, my steps heavy, each one echoing with the uncertainty I was carrying. The pack's distrust was a wound I didn't know how to heal, but the worst part wasn't the doubt they cast on me. It was the doubt I was starting to feel in myself. I entered my quarters and closed the door behind me, locking it to block out the world. My gaze fell on the bed where Mara had slept, the space beside me empty. My mind raced, my thoughts a blur. I couldn't escape the weight of what I had to do. I walked over to the window, looking out at the storm. The wind howled, and the rain lashed against the panes, as if nature itself was trying to tear down the walls. I wasn't sure which I feared more, the storm outside or the storm inside me. I reached for the pendant Mara had given me, the one she always wore around her neck. It was still there, hidden beneath the sheets, and I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. The silver gleamed faintly in the dim light. It was a symbol of her trust, of the connection we shared. But I didn't know how to reconcile that with the pack. I didn't know how to protect her and still follow the pack's rules. And as I stared at the pendant in my hand, I realized something. I didn't know how to do this anymore. I wasn't just torn between Mara and the pack. I was torn between the man I used to be and the man I was becoming. And I wasn't sure I was ready for either. The warehouse was everything I'd expected. Cold, decaying, a labyrinth of concrete and rusted metal. Abandoned by the world but still alive with the whispers of danger. The air inside was thick with the scent of mildew and oil, the dampness of decay. It was the kind of place that swallowed noise whole, where even the quietest movement felt like an announcement. Mara wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be alone in this forsaken place. She was supposed to be at my side, fighting alongside me. But here she was, trapped, caught in the very underworld I had tried to protect her from. I clenched my fists, the anger rising like a tide inside me. I could hear the distant echo of her voice, faint, but unmistakable. She was alive. That was the one thing that kept me going, even though everything else inside me screamed that I had failed her. She'd been taken, betrayed, and I knew the worst part: it was my fault. I had failed to see it coming. The cracks in the pack. The hesitation, the distrust that had spread like a disease. They had exploited that weakness, and now Mara was paying the price. Inside the warehouse, Mara sat in the center of a dimly lit room, bound to a chair, her eyes narrowed as she surveyed the men around her. Shadows flickered in the corners, their presence barely noticeable, but I knew they were there. Vasa's men. The same ones who had set this trap. She was surrounded by figures whose names I didn't need to know, figures from her past, people who had been waiting for her. They were using her to send a message, to break her, to tear down the only thing that had ever meant anything to her. One of them, a tall man with a scar that ran from his cheek to his jaw, stepped forward. His voice was rough, barely audible over the sound of the rain pounding against the metal roof above them. "You've been a problem for too long, Mara. We've been patient, but the game is over." Mara didn't flinch at any of them. She stared him down, her body tense, but there was something in her eyes, something that wasn't fear. She was strong. Too strong to let them see how badly she was hurting. She wasn't just a victim here. Not yet. "Get to the point," she said, her voice cold. "You think you can break me, but you won't." The man laughed, his grin cruel. "We'll see about that." The room seemed to close in around her as they began their interrogation. Mara didn't speak, didn't give them the satisfaction of her words. She kept her silence, even when they pressed her for answers she knew she couldn't give. She wasn't giving them anything. And despite the situation, despite the way my heart ached knowing she was alone in that hellhole, I couldn't help but admire her strength. The way she stood firm, not giving them an inch, not letting them have the power they thought they held over her. It wasn't just defiance, it was survival. One of the men grabbed her hair, yanking her head back so she would look at him. "You'll tell us everything eventually. We'll make sure of it." But Mara didn't break. Her eyes flashed with fire, her lips curling into a bitter smile. "You don't scare me," she said, each word measured and heavy with meaning. "You should be more worried about yourselves." It was a small victory, one that wouldn't mean much in the end. But I could feel it. I could feel the defiance radiating off her, and I knew she wasn't done. This wasn't how it ended. Not for her. Not for me. Outside I moved quietly, staying close to the shadows. My senses were on edge, my every nerve tuned to the sounds around me. The warehouse was a maze, and I wasn't going to rush in blindly. I had no idea how many of Vasa's men were inside, how many would be waiting for me. But I knew I was getting her out of there. I couldn't afford to fail again. Not now. Not when I knew deep down that if I didn't get to her soon, it would be too late. The pack's betrayal was still fresh, still festering in my chest like an open wound. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. Not anymore. I had made mistakes, yes. But this was different. Mara wasn't just a pawn in some game. She was my mate. And I would fight for her, no matter what. I pressed my back against the cold wall, watching the entrance. I couldn't rush in. Not without a plan. I had to be smarter than that. I wasn't just dealing with Vasa's men. I was dealing with my own fractured pack. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. But I would get her back. That was the only thing that mattered. I took a deep breath, my gaze never leaving the entrance to the warehouse, as the rain continued to fall. The storm inside me hadn't passed. It was only growing stronger, and I was ready for whatever came next. "I'll get you out, Mara," I whispered to the wind. "I swear I will." And with that promise, I moved into the shadows, preparing for what would come next. The clock was ticking. The clearing was quiet, save for the crackling of the campfire in the center. The moon hung low in the sky, its pale light casting long shadows across the trees. The rain from the storm earlier had subsided, leaving behind a cool, crisp air that smelled of pine and wet earth. The night felt still, but underneath the calm was a quiet energy, a weight of what we were about to do. I stood with my back to the trees, my senses stretched out, alert for any sign of danger. Mara was still out there, held by the enemy, and time was slipping through my fingers. I had to act, but I couldn't do it alone. Around the fire, the group of us gathered. The small circle of faces looked back at me, a mixture of loyalty and uncertainty in their eyes. Some were from the pack, others were new allies, people Mara had crossed paths with in her past. They were all here for one reason, to bring her back. First, there was Cass, a wiry Werewolf who was quiet by nature, but sharp in a fight. He'd grown up with me, his loyalty unquestionable, but tonight I could see the hesitation in his eyes. The pack's fracture was as much on his mind as mine. Then there was Lila, an unexpected ally from Mara's world, a human, yes, but with connections that spanned the city's darkest corners. She had been an operative in some shady underground dealings before the law had finally caught up with her. She'd met Mara during one of those deals and had become a friend ever since. She was tough, resourceful, and smarter than anyone gave her credit for. Beside her was Anton, a man who had worked as a mercenary, though his motives for joining us were far less about money and more about something deeper. His scarred face and hard eyes told a story of regret and redemption. He'd fought for causes that never mattered, but with us, there was something real to fight for. Each of them had their own skills that made them indispensable. We were a mismatched team, but if we were going to take on Vassar and his men, I needed all of them. I pulled my thoughts back to the present, meeting the eyes of each person around the fire. We had a plan, but it was risky. It was more than just a rescue, it was a chance to strike at the heart of the criminal network that had been pulling the strings for too long. And it had to work. "Here's how it's going to go," I said, my voice steady but low enough to keep the plan between us. "Vassar won't expect us to come after him, not with his men scattered around the warehouse. We've got the element of surprise on our side." Cass shifted, leaning forward, his hands clasped together in front of him. "You think we can just walk in, grab her, and get out before they notice?" "We'll have to," I said. "There's no time to waste. Every minute we sit here, Mara's getting farther from us. The faster we move, the better." Lila nodded, her sharp eyes scanning the map in front of her. "We'll need a distraction," she said. "Something to keep their attention away from the entrance." "I can handle that." "Good," I said, grateful for her skills. "We'll need you to get inside, make sure we're not walking into a trap." Anton cracked his knuckles. "And I'll handle any backup that comes after you." His voice was gruff, but his words carried the weight of someone who had lived through more fights than anyone should. The plan was simple. We would infiltrate the warehouse, split into teams, and get Mara out. We'd use the cover of night, the rain, and the chaos of Vassar's operations to our advantage. But there were risks. No matter how careful we were, no matter how well we'd planned, we were going up against people who knew how to fight dirty. I leaned back, letting the fire's warmth hit my skin. There was a certain unease that lingered in the back of my mind. This wasn't just about bringing Mara back. This was about something bigger, a fight for what was left of our pack, our future. I wasn't sure where we'd land when this was all over, but I had to believe this was the right choice. The only choice. Mara's strong, I said, my voice quieter now, just for myself. She won't make it easy for them. She'll be ready. Cass looked at me, his eyes serious. But will we be ready for her when we find her? It was a good question, one that echoed in the silence between us. We all knew the answer. We had to be. A moment passed before Leela spoke again, her voice steady, but with an edge of something personal in it. We do this together. There's no other way. She turned her gaze to the others, her face hardening. And we finish it. For her. For all of us. Her words held weight. She was right. We couldn't afford to fail. I let out a breath, pushing the tension from my shoulders, trying to steady the beating of my heart. There was so much uncertainty ahead, so much that was out of my control. But I couldn't let that stop me. I had made a promise to Mara, and I'd do whatever it took to keep it. As the night deepened, the fire crackled in front of us, casting long shadows across the clearing. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of rain and earth, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I was moving forward. The plan was set. The team was ready, but there was one thing left to do. I'm going in, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions brewing inside me, and I'm bringing Mara back. As I turned to face the darkness, the clearing behind me was quiet, the campfire flickering in the wind. This was it. The moment where everything changed. The days bled into each other, grinding, endless but necessary. Each one was filled with movement, with planning, with trying to piece together the chaos of the situation into something that would make sense. We trained, we planned, we prepared. Time was running out, but we couldn't afford to move too quickly. Every decision, every step had to be calculated. We spent hours in the woods, practicing our tactics. The sound of boots hitting the soft earth, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the clash of metal against wood, it became a constant rhythm. Our team was small but strong. Each one of us brought something vital to the table, and though we were all different, there was an unspoken unity in the way we moved. Cass worked alongside me, our swords flashing through the air as we sparred. His movements were sharp, quick, but I could see the doubt in his eyes, the same doubt I'd seen in myself. We both had our reasons for being here, for fighting, but that didn't make the weight any easier to carry. Still, we fought with everything we had, and with every swing of the blade, with every drop of sweat, the tension seemed to ease just a little. Lila was off to the side, her eyes scanning the woods for any sign of danger, but her focus was on something else. She was good at reading people, good at seeing things others missed. She trained herself to be as stealthy as possible, her movements like a shadow slipping between trees. She wasn't here just for Mara. She was here because, like the rest of us, she had something to prove. We all did. Anton was the wild card. He was older than the rest of us, and his past was a murky thing, one he didn't often talk about. But when he spoke, his words carried weight, and when he trained, he did it with the kind of precision that only came from experience. His combat skills were unmatched, and I'd seen him take down men twice his size with ease. But there was more to him than just brute strength. Every time he looked at me, there was something unspoken in his gaze, something that made me wonder what kind of burden he carried. I watched them all as we trained, watched how they pushed themselves, how they pushed me too. Each of us had a reason to be here. Each of us was tied to this mission by something deeper than just the need for survival. It was about loyalty. It was about redemption. We spent hours gathering intelligence. Lila had her contacts, people she'd used to work with. They gave us what they could, information about Vassar's hideouts, his routes, the movements of his men. Some of it was useful. Some of it was nothing but noise, but every piece brought us closer. Every scrap of information was another step in the right direction. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being watched, though. There were too many times when I'd catch a flicker of movement in the trees or hear the soft sound of footsteps following us. It didn't take a werewolf's senses to know we were being hunted, and I knew Vassar was getting closer. There were small victories, too. A piece of information that brought us closer to finding Mara. A minor alley rescued from a dangerous situation who owed us a debt. Each one felt like a victory, but each one also felt like a temporary reprieve. The endgame was still out there, looming, and none of us could forget that. In the quiet moments when the fire burned low and the others were asleep, I would sit and think of Mara. I could see her in my mind's eye, her fierce determination, her strength. She wasn't one to break easily, and I knew that even now, as she fought through whatever hell Vassar had her in, she was holding on. I kept thinking about the last time we were together. Her touch, her voice, the way she looked at me like I was the only one who could make everything right. I knew I couldn't fix everything for her, but I could fix this. I could bring her back. I was getting closer too. I could feel the pull, the bond between us growing stronger every day. It wasn't just the mission anymore. It wasn't just about getting her back. It was about something deeper, something that went beyond survival. The fire crackled, and I stood up, feeling the weight of the night pressing in. I couldn't sleep. I had too many things running through my mind, too many fears, too many doubts. The plan was falling into place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Something wasn't right. I looked over at the others, sleeping in their makeshift shelters around the camp. They were all exhausted, their bodies pushed to their limits, but their determination never wavered. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of peace settle in my chest. Maybe we weren't ready. Maybe we still had things to figure out. But we had something that mattered. We had each other. The next day we pushed forward. The rain had returned, but it didn't slow us down. We were close. I could feel it in my bones. Mara was out there and I was getting her back. The doubt, the fear, it hadn't disappeared. But now it wasn't a weight that dragged me down. It was a fire that pushed me forward. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was walking into the unknown. I felt like I was walking towards something I was meant to do. And whatever it took, I'd make sure I got her back. We were ready. The sky above us churned with fury. The storm had rolled in faster than we'd expected, but the weather didn't matter. Not now. Not when I could almost feel Mara's presence in the air, trapped somewhere inside that warehouse, surrounded by enemies who would kill her without a second thought. The winds howled, and flashes of lightning lit the sky, casting eerie shadows on the abandoned structures ahead of us. The world felt as if it was on the edge of something dangerous. The warehouse loomed in front of us like a fortress. The brick walls were old, cracked, and covered in grime, but there was something menacing about it. The windows were boarded up, the gates locked down tight, but I knew the layout well enough to get inside without being seen. I crouched low, the mud sucking at my boots as I motioned for the others to follow. We were a small group, Cass, Anton, Lila, and me, but it was all we needed. Each of us had a role to play. We had trained for this. We had prepared for weeks. Every move counted now. There were no second chances. Lila was already moving ahead, her movements silent and quick, a shadow in the night. She had a way of blending into the darkness, making herself disappear from sight. Cass followed close behind, his wolf senses sharp, watching for any signs of movement. Anton was the rear guard, his eyes scanning the perimeter, looking for anyone who might be waiting to ambush us. I stayed in the middle, my senses alert, every muscle tensed and ready. I could feel the weight of the moment, the responsibility on my shoulders. This wasn't just a mission, it was Mara. She was my fated mate, and I was the one who was supposed to protect her. I wasn't going to fail her now. Each step we took was calculated, deliberate. The rain beat down harder, the drops heavier as we approached the building. The sound of thunder rolling overhead was almost deafening, but it worked to our advantage. The storm masked our movements, making it harder for anyone to hear us coming. We reached the side of the warehouse, and I signaled for Lila to take the lead. She moved swiftly, slipping through the shadows and up to the side door. She knelt, working quickly at the lock with a set of tools she kept hidden on her belt. I could barely hear her, her hands moving with the precision of someone who'd done this 100 times before. There was no time to waste. I turned my attention to the shadows around us, watching for any signs of danger. My senses were heightened, every flicker of movement, every breath of air, something I couldn't ignore. I couldn't afford to make a mistake now. Lila signaled that the door was open, and we moved in as one. The building was dark inside, only faint moonlight filtering through the cracks in the walls, casting long, jagged shadows across the floor. I couldn't see much, but I could feel the tension in the air. The scent of sweat and stale air mixed with the faint smell of chemicals. We were in their territory now. We crept through the corridors, our footsteps silent against the cold concrete floor. Each one of us was a part of a well-oiled machine moving in sync, anticipating each other's moves. Cass moved ahead, his wolf senses alert, listening for any sound of movement. Anton took the rear, covering our backs. I stayed in the middle, my eyes scanning the path ahead, every shadow a potential enemy. We reached a staircase, and I held up my hand, signaling for a halt. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Something was wrong. I motioned for Lila to check the door at the top of the stairs. She moved ahead, and I followed, my heart hammering in my chest. The longer this took, the more likely it was that Mara would be moved, or worse. Lila reached the door, and with a quick glance at me, she turned the handle. The door creaked open just a fraction. She slipped through, and I followed, my body tight with anticipation. The room we entered was dimly lit, and I could see the outlines of men, shadowy figures standing around a large metal table. They were talking in low voices, unaware of our presence. I motioned for the others to stay low, and we moved toward the far side of the room, taking cover behind crates and barrels. I felt my wolf stir, my instinct screaming at me to take action. But I held back. We couldn't afford to reveal ourselves yet, not until we had eyes on Mara. Where is she? I whispered, my voice barely audible as I glanced at Lila. She was already scanning the room, her eyes sharp. She nodded toward a door on the far side of the room. The unmistakable sound of Mara's voice reached my ears, low, defiant, but unmistakably hers. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of that sound in my chest. She was close. I was so close to getting her back. On my mark, I muttered to the others, keeping my voice barely above a whisper. We move in. Lila crouched by the door, her hand hovering near the handle. Anton moved to position himself behind the crates, ready to back us up. Cass was already in position, his eyes trained on the men in front of us. I could hear the thud of my heart in my chest. The plan was in place, but there was no room for error now. One misstep, and everything would fall apart. The tension was suffocating. I nodded once, signaling for the door to be opened. In a flash, we were moving. Lila was the first through, her swift movements like a whisper in the wind. Cass was next, his form a blur as he darted toward the men. I followed, my body ready, my mind locked on the target, Mara. The room erupted into chaos. The sound of men shouting, the clash of fists and claws, the sharp hiss of metal cutting through the air. I pushed through the chaos, the scent of blood and sweat thick in the air, the sounds of battle surrounding me. And then I saw her, Mara. Her eyes locked on mine, a flash of relief, and something else, something I couldn't name, passing through her gaze. She was bruised, exhausted, but alive. I didn't hesitate. I reached for her, pulling her close, my heart hammering in my chest as I held her for the first time in what felt like forever. "We're getting you out of here," I whispered, my voice hoarse. She nodded, her body trembling in my arms, but she was still strong. She wasn't broken. And neither was I. We had made it this far. And nothing was going to stop us now. The moment we burst through the door, the air in the warehouse shifted. It wasn't just the cold, stale scent of dust and oil, it was the sudden realization that everything was about to change. I could hear the chaos before I saw it. Yells, the clang of metal against concrete, the frantic shuffling of feet, the sound of a fight. It was a battle for survival, and we were smack in the middle of it. I barely registered the men in front of me before I was on the first one, my fists flying. The force of the blow took him down before he could react, but there was no time to savor the win. I saw the flicker of movement to the left. Cass, Anton, Lila, they were already in the thick of it, handling the rest of Vasa's men with practiced ease. The room exploded into a blur of motion. My claws raked across a man's face as he lunged toward me, his body crashing into the concrete floor with a sickening thud. I didn't stop. I couldn't. There was no room for hesitation. We had one goal: get Mara out. Cass moved like a shadow, his strength and speed overwhelming. He grabbed one of the men by the collar, tossing him like a rag doll into a stack of crates. Lila darted past him, slipping behind another man and knocking him out with a swift, calculated strike. Anton, with his brutal efficiency, was taking down anyone who came too close, using his size and experience to his advantage. I kept my focus ahead, moving with a lethal grace, my senses stretched to their limits. The warehouse was a maze of steel and shadows, but I wasn't just following the noise. I was following her, my mate. My heart was still racing, but now it was a controlled fire, burning with purpose. Then I saw her. Mara. She was chained to a pillar in the far corner of the room, her head bowed, her body battered but not broken. I couldn't see her face clearly from where I stood, but there was no mistaking it. She was alive, and that was all that mattered. I surged forward, tearing through the chaos, the sound of battle fading into the background as I pushed past the last of Vasa's men. My body moved without thinking, my instincts taking over. I reached her in seconds, crouching in front of her, my hands coming to her face, desperate to see if she was okay. Mara, I breathed, my voice a mixture of relief and disbelief. Her eyes opened slowly, and for a heartbeat, everything else disappeared. It was just the two of us together. But then she winced, her body shuddering, and the moment was gone. The reality of the fight was still pressing in on us. "We're getting you out of here," I said, my voice tight with emotion. She nodded, her gaze still a little unfocused. "I didn't think you'd come." I didn't answer. There was no time for words. I pulled the chains off of her, my claws tearing through the metal with ease. "Let's move," I said, urgency in my voice. But before we could take a step, a scream tore through the air. A group of men was rushing toward us, their guns drawn. There were too many of them. We were pinned down. I shoved Mara behind me, instinctively stepping between her and the threat. My body was already shifting, the werewolf side of me waking up with a roar of fury. But as I stood there, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. The odds were stacked against us. Cass and Anton were already charging at the oncoming men, and Lila was off to the side, looking for an opening. But the men weren't going down without a fight. One of them fired, the shot ringing out in the silence before the chaos erupted again. It missed me by inches, but that didn't stop the rush of adrenaline that shot through me. I was moving before I even realized it. I closed the distance between myself and the man who'd fired, my claws extending, ripping through the air. The force of the blow sent him crashing into the wall, his body crumpling into a heap. But more came. More kept coming. Each moment was a battle, a blur of claws, fists, and blood. But with every fight, every takedown, we were pushing forward, getting closer to safety. And then, just as the tide of battle seemed to shift in our favor, a figure appeared in the doorway. Vasseur. He stood there, his eyes cold, watching us with a cruel smile, the scent of victory already in the air. "You think you can stop me," he sneered, his voice echoing through the chaos. "You're too late." I felt the tension spike in my chest. This wasn't just about Mara anymore. This was about all of us. About the pack. About everything we had left. I couldn't wait. I couldn't let him get away. I lunged at him, my body moving on instinct, my rage and desperation fueling every movement. We collided, and for a moment everything stopped. The world was nothing but the two of us, locked in a struggle for control. His strength was nothing to laugh at, but I was faster. I was better. My claws sank into his flesh, and with a savage growl, I twisted, taking him down. But as he fell, his grip tightened around my arm, pulling me with him. He was going to take me down with him. But before he could, Lila was there, her knife flashing through the air and driving straight into his side. The Sir gasped, the fight leaving him as quickly as it had started. He collapsed, dead weight in my arms. I stood over him, panting, my heart racing. But I didn't have time to savor the victory. The battle was still on, and there was still danger. "Mara," I said, my voice hoarse as I turned to her. She was standing, her face pale but determined. She was holding herself together, even after everything she'd been through. "We're not done yet," I said, my voice tight. The warehouse was clearing out, but I could feel the weight of what had just happened, the cost of getting her back. We had won. But victory didn't come without sacrifice. I helped her to her feet, and together we made our way to the exit, fighting the last remnants of the enemy, pushing forward, until the door opened to the stormy night. The rain fell hard, but we were free. I had her back, but I knew the journey wasn't over yet. There was still work to do. The council chamber felt different this time. The heavy stone walls, once so suffocating and cold, now seemed warmer, as if the very room had breathed a sigh of relief. The harshness of the battle was behind us, and though we hadn't yet found all the answers, there was a quiet shift in the air. The early light of dawn filtered through the stained glass windows, casting soft hues of amber and violet onto the stone floor. The darkness of the night had passed, and with it, something else had begun to change. Mara stood beside me, her posture still, but I could feel the weight of everything she'd been through, pressing down on her. Her face was still bruised, but the spark in her eyes was undeniable. She'd made it through the worst of it, and so had I. But this moment wasn't just about us. It was about what we'd gone through together and what we'd become because of it. The pack was gathered before us, and their eyes weren't full of suspicion anymore. They weren't watching us with the same mistrust that had weighed on my shoulders just days ago. There was something else now, something tentative but there. Hope. A fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, as I met the eyes of each elder. Arik stood at the forefront, his posture straight, but there was something in his gaze now that I hadn't seen before. Respect, or at least the start of it. "Mara," Arik began, his voice steady but not as cold as before, "you've proven yourself. Through actions, not words. You're not like the rest of us, you never were, but there is a strength in that. A strength we underestimated." I felt Mara tense beside me, but I put a hand on her arm, grounding her. This wasn't just about us proving ourselves anymore, it was about healing. About bringing the pack together. "You've earned your place," I said, my voice carrying across the room. "And so have I. The traditions that have held us together for so long have also held us back. We've clung to them because we were afraid of what change might bring. But look at us now. Look at what we've survived. Together." There was a long pause, the silence heavy with the weight of unspoken words. Then Cuss stepped forward, his eyes serious. "I never thought I'd see the day," he said, his voice quiet but resolute. "The pack, bound by more than just tradition, by something stronger. But here we are." I could feel the shift, the subtle change in the air, as the pack began to stir, murmuring among themselves. Not in opposition, but in understanding. They were starting to see the potential for something more than rigid rules. Something that could bind us all, no matter our backgrounds. Mara met my gaze, her eyes reflecting the quiet realization that this was just the beginning. We'd come through the storm, but the journey was far from over. Arik cleared his throat. "There will be changes," he said, his voice filled with the authority of one who had finally accepted what needed to be done. "But we will make them. Together." It wasn't a declaration of victory, it was something better. It was the first step toward reconciliation. The room began to come alive with the sound of voices, not in conflict but in conversation. The pack members were talking, discussing what needed to be done, how they would move forward. It was the first real conversation I'd seen in this room for as long as I could remember. It was the first real opportunity for us to rebuild, to forge something new. I glanced at Mara, my heart still heavy, but with a glimmer of something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The sun was rising outside, casting its light over the pack, over the room. It wasn't just the dawn of a new day, it was the dawn of a new beginning. The moon had set. The darkness had faded. And now we stood on the threshold of something brighter, something we had the power to build together. Mara stepped forward, her voice steady as she addressed the pack. "I'm not here to change everything. I'm here because I believe in what we can become. Together." Her words hung in the air, and I saw the pack members exchange looks that were no longer full of judgment, but of possibility. I knew we had a long road ahead of us. There were still wounds to heal, old scars that would take time to fade. But as I stood there beside Mara, feeling the weight of the journey we'd walked together, I knew one thing for sure: we weren't alone anymore. The pack, fractured as it was beginning to understand that. I looked around at the faces in the room, some old, some new, but all of them were part of this change. And in that moment I knew that Mara wasn't just my fated mate, she was the catalyst. She was the spark that had ignited this transformation in us all. Together we could rebuild. Together we could start again. As the last of the shadows faded, the first rays of sunlight touched the stone floor, breaking through the stained glass in warm streaks of color. A new day had begun. A new era. And I wasn't about to let anything take that away from us. The night had given way to the first light of dawn, and the world seemed to breathe in time with the rhythm of the earth itself. The full moon, bright and unyielding just hours before, had slowly surrendered to the quiet promise of morning, its pale light dimming as the sky shifted from dark to a gentle violet. Mara and I stood in a quiet clearing outside the pack's territory, away from the noise and the weight of the decision still looming in the air. The trees were tall, their branches weaving together to form a natural canopy above us. There was a peace here, a rare kind of stillness where nature and magic seemed to come together, converging in a space where anything felt possible. The air was cool but not cold, and the scent of the forest of earth and leaves was sharper here, more real, like a grounding reminder of where we had come from. I turned to look at Mara, who stood beside me, her face turned toward the horizon, her eyes distant but not lost. She was my anchor in a world that had been anything but stable. And yet here we were, together, against all odds. "Mara," I said, my voice low and soft. She turned to face me, her gaze steady. She'd been through so much, seen so much, and yet there she was, standing strong, the strength in her so much more than just her physical resilience. It was a strength that came from within, from knowing who she was and what she was capable of. "I never thought we'd be here," I continued, taking a step toward her. "I never thought we'd make it this far." She smiled faintly, the lines of exhaustion still visible on her face, but her eyes were brighter now. "Neither did I," she admitted. "But here we are." I closed the distance between us, my hand finding hers. The connection between us, that pull, was stronger than ever. And in that moment I knew what had always been true: I was no longer just leading the pack. I was leading with her. We had become something more than just two individuals. We were partners, in every sense of the word. "I want to make it right," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I want to rebuild the pack, make it something better. But I don't want to do it without you, Mara. You're not just my mate, you're everything." She squeezed my hand, her gaze softening. "We'll do it together, Lucien. The pack needs both of us, not just you. I'm not some outsider anymore. I'm a part of this, just as much as you are. I'm here to stay." I drew her into my arms, holding her close, feeling the steady beat of her heart against mine. There were still challenges ahead. The wounds within the pack, the mistrust, the fractures we had to heal, they were real, and they were painful. But in that moment, none of that mattered. All I could think about was her, the way she stood by me, the way she held me together when everything felt like it was falling apart. "We'll lead them," I whispered into her hair, the words a promise that had been forming for longer than I realized. "We'll change this together. We'll make this pack into something that's not just about tradition or power. We'll make it about us." She pulled back slightly, her gaze meeting mine, and in her eyes I saw the same certainty, the same fierce determination that had burned in me for so long. "And we'll bridge the gap between them," she said, her voice steady. "The humans and the supernatural. There's no future without both. We can't leave anyone behind." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle deep within me. She was right. Our future wasn't just about rebuilding the pack, it was about breaking down the walls between worlds, between species, and making a place where both could live side by side. We'd already taken the first step, but there was more to do. So much more. I leaned down, pressing my forehead against hers. "We're just getting started, Mara, and I'm not letting go of you. Not ever." She smiled then, the softest of smiles, the kind that spoke volumes more than any words could. "I wouldn't let you if I could." The sky above us had shifted fully now, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The darkness had passed, and the day had arrived. The world felt like it was starting fresh. And for the first time in so long, I felt that same renewal. A chance to begin again. Together. We stood there for a long moment, the wind gentle against our skin, the quiet hum of nature surrounding us. The future stretched out before us, uncertain, yes, but full of potential. We had the power to shape it now. And I knew, as I stood beside Mara, that we would. This was our new dawn, and nothing, no one would ever take it from us. The sun was setting, casting its golden light over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of red and orange. It was the kind of sunset that made everything feel possible, like the world itself was celebrating something new, something bright. I stood at the edge of the clearing, my eyes on Mara as she approached me, the breeze tussling her hair, her face lit by the fading sunlight. There was peace in her steps now. No more fear, no more doubt, just certainty, just us. The pack was gathered around, their voices low, their faces relaxed for the first time in what felt like forever. The walls we had spent so long building between us and the world between us and each other had finally come down, and in its place was something better. Something we had fought for. Together. "Mara," I said, my voice rough with emotion as I took her hand in mine. She smiled at me, the kind of smile that made my heart swell with pride. "We did it," she said softly, her voice full of that quiet joy that had eluded us for so long. I looked around at the pack members' old faces, new faces, each one of them standing a little taller, a little prouder. They weren't just survivors of the past. They were part of the future we were building, side by side, no one left behind. "I couldn't have done this without you," I said, my voice steady now, the weight of everything finally lifting. "None of it." She squeezed my hand, her gaze unwavering. "You didn't have to. We're in this together." There were no more barriers, no more secrets, no more dividing lines between the old and the new. As I stood there, holding her hand, I knew this was just the beginning. We had changed everything, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who would come after us. The future was ours to create. The first stars were starting to twinkle above, and the fire crackled beside us, its warmth spreading out into the cool night. The sound of laughter, of voices coming together in celebration, filled the air. We were all here together in this moment. I pulled Mara close, my arms wrapping around her as I whispered, "This is where we start. A new life. A new future." She leaned into me, her cheek resting against my chest, her voice soft but certain. "We've earned it." The night stretched out before us, full of promise, full of hope. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't worry about what would come next. I didn't need to, because I knew deep in my bones that whatever happened, we would face it together. Mara and I. The pack. The future. And with that, as the stars above watched over us, we stepped forward into the world. We would create a world where destiny was not something to fight against, but something to embrace. The journey had been long, and it had been hard. But now it was ours to shape. The battle was over. The victory was ours. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that everything was possible. Our new beginning had just begun.